Okay, everybody, thank you for tuning in to The Dish, whether you are a live viewer or you are watching at a later time. Appreciate your support of The Dish, and we have another episode with talking with a little bit different guests today, because not only are they in the restaurant business for themselves, running restaurants, but they also serve the restaurant industry, and we'll get more into that once they come on board. But for those that are not familiar with The Dish, what we do is have conversations with those in the restaurant industry, typically a chef or a GM or an owner along those lines, and just get their story, get to hear about everything that they're up to. And so that's always fun for us to learn more and more about what's going on in the industry throughout the United States. We have not branched out into other countries yet, but that's all good. And so we are, so for those of you that don't know, when we're not interviewing, we're also helping our restaurants with automating their bookings, getting more opportunities, and bringing in and helping them with doing more with their events. So with that being said, we want to invite our new friend, Alistair Levine. And so he's coming on now to say hello. Hey, how's it going, Alistair?
Good. Can you see me and hear me?
And yes, you look like you're in Blair Witch Project right now, but it's all good.
I wonder what's going on with my camera then.
Yeah, we'll just say
Here, I'll turn it around and see if the back camera works any better. Can you see me?
Yeah, I can see you.
Weird. Who knows what's going on? Technology is always a fun thing.
Yeah, there it is. It's kind of glitching back and forth between, I don't know what that is. Yeah.
Ooh.
Let's see. Yeah, you're there. And there we go. Excellent. Well, we want to jump in despite technical it happens. It's the internet. It's in this case, it's be living, and you never know what's going to happen with all the different technologies we got in place. But yeah, so we want to hear about what you're up to. Obviously, like I mentioned beforehand, you not only are you doing restaurants, but you also serve the industry through Vine Solutions. So just in general, give us a little bit about your story as it pertains to the restaurant industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So, both businesses were actually started by my dad. So he was the CFO of Gordon Biersch and Il Fornaio. And then, had always sort of had a dream of owning restaurants, started out as a dishwasher in the industry back when he was like, 13 or 15. And, put himself through school, working as a waiter, doing, all sorts of fun tableside preparations and things like that. And then went to business school down in Stanford. So he was originally lived up in Canada after originally being born in Scotland. And then, basically got his MBA at Stanford and moved into the restaurant industry because that was always where his passion was as a CFO. And eventually was able to start his own restaurants. So our oldest restaurant's 26 years old. And what he found was that early on he wasn't getting the financial data he needed to effectively operate the restaurant in the way that he was sort of trained to do so on the sort of finance side. And so Vine Solutions was born 24 years ago. And so as a result, both those businesses have always sort of grown together. So we're now up to 6 restaurants on the restaurant group side, and we've got about 201 clients on the Vine Solutions accounting, advisory, HR side. And so, yeah, I mean, I got involved with, about 3 years ago, he passed away, sadly. And so I got involved at the board level for both businesses then. And then joined Vine Solutions earlier this year, full time, as sort of a result of this upheaval that we're all dealing with in this global pandemic.
Yeah. All right. I think it might be better just to go ahead and go with the black and white, because for some reason it's
glitching out still.
It's doing some kind of weird like shade.
I just look like I'm in Blair Witch Project. I'm not sure what's going on. It's very weird.
Yeah, it could be the Android's not playing well with the software or something. You never know at this point. But yeah, so tell us a little bit, like you mentioned the restaurants. So can you give us a little bit of a rundown on the restaurants?
Yeah, so we operate 6 full-service restaurants. 3 are French brasseries. One is a steakhouse, and one is a modern Mediterranean place, and then one's a farm-to-table sort of new American restaurant where we help out with some of the management, and there's a different like a different owner operator of the actual concept, and then we have a management company that sits on sort of on top of all that. The oldest, as I said, was 26 years old. Is 26 years old. And the youngest Meso opened last year.
Okay, very good. And I think they're not all in the same place, right? Are there different
No,
locations?
no, we've got. Well, I mean, they're all sort of regional, so they're all San Francisco Bay Area. We don't actually have any restaurants in the city, thankfully, right now. But we've got stuff up in the North Bay in Marin County, and then a bunch down sort of in the San Jose area, and then Menlo Park as well, which is just sort of south of the San Francisco airport. For those people less familiar with sort of the Bay Area. And then we do also have 3 virtual brands we've launched during the pandemic, which are Mac and Cheese Shop, Kebabery, and Lido's Cantina, that we fulfilled out of those brands, out of our existing sort of physical footprint.
All right, right. So, yeah, I know that's something that's kind of become in vogue to some extent with the that type of solution. Was that something you guys had already looked into doing, or just you decided to go ahead and launch it?
We just sort of launched it. We were seeing, one of the brands, Lido's, is a sous chef, is super passionate about tacos, paella, and sangria. And we looked at sort of the demographic data that was originally launched at our Larkspur location, which is up in Marin County, just north of San Francisco. And he was super passionate about it. There wasn't really anyone doing that concept around us, and so it seemed like sort of a natural thing while we were stuck in this, no outdoor dine-in, no indoor dine-in. Hey, how can we drive some additional revenue and get some additional ordering going, and standing up a virtual brand, a little bit different sort of in scope and scale than say like what Brinkman or these larger orgs are doing. But hey, like let's support our team. Let's give them the ability to execute on a passion project, and let's make some money doing it. Just the risk was so low on a financial basis, and the upside seemed really good, both on a sort of personal side and also, personal HR side, as well as on a business case side, that it just kind of became a no-brainer. And then Mac and Cheese Shop was sort of the same way. We did mac and cheese at LB Steak, our steak place. And so we saw tons of orders coming in for that. And we're like, hey, well, what if we came up with 4 or 5 different options in terms of, let's do a buffalo style one, or let's do a fried chicken with green peppercorn gravy, sort of steak au poivre, but with fried chicken, mac and cheese, and then a veggie one. And, play around with some of this stuff, because we had the resource. When the pandemic hit, we basically closed almost all the properties, consolidated all of them in one in San Jose, and then fulfilled 3 concepts out of one location. And we were having basically pretty much only our management team fulfill those orders. And so they started, coming up with ideas like, hey, what if we tried this? What if we tried that? And when we looked at it, it was very reasonably, priced to, we were able to stand up a new concept for about $2,500.
All right.
And obviously mac and cheese has great food cost on it too. So, it made it a really easy decision to say yes. And we've seen great results. And, I think we see longer term about 25% of our revenue will be delivery takeout, even in sort of the new normal and dine-in resumes. Our long-term goal is to get 25% of our overall corporate group revenue to be takeout and delivery. And, I think that's the equivalent of us adding basically an entire new property, but based off the back of our existing footprint, our existing labor and whatnot. So much more profitable business.
Right, right. Very nice, very nice. I mean, a lot of questions kind of pop up while you're talking there, but do you see the when everything is kind of back to you can kind of go and do whatever you want, which I fully expect
Yeah.
at some level, do you think that there will be a boom of some sort of people wanting to be in the restaurants as opposed to always having ordered in for the last?
I think there's going to be both. I mean, I think certainly, okay, so economic reality aside, that we're clearly in a recession, and that's going to have an impact on dining out numbers. But I think if you look at overall demand versus supply, the supply has dropped so dramatically and will continue to drop so dramatically, sadly, through the rest of the year and early next year. Is, right now, a lot of portions of the country get outdoor dine in, and we're seeing a lot of our clients on the consulting side and also our own restaurants, doing respectable, solid numbers, down 25-30%, but still doing 60 to 70% revenue numbers with outdoor dine in only. You know, some of our landlords have been great. The cities, have been very mixed bag, but in some cases the cities have been great about, hey, let's block off streets, let's create all this outdoor dine-in space. And in places where there's been a great sort of mix between regulatory, landlord, and whatnot, we've been able to do 70% of normal revenue, outdoor dine-in only, and so we're actually making money in a couple of our properties even before sort of factoring in PPP, just with much reduced shift. So, all that goes away over the next couple months as we hit the fall, winter, bad weather, etc. Some places in the country, it'll be going away sooner, others later, right, etc. I don't think I think long term demand will still outstrip supply, because I'm gonna guess we're gonna see a 30 to 60% failure rate on independent restaurant side, and I don't think that even with a recession we might see a 25 to 30% demand drop, which we saw in 07, 08, or 01, or any of the sort of past recessions. But we've already impacted supply by more than that. And so I actually think, yes, the restaurants that can make it through it are going to see a boom. But the critical thing is, can you survive, right? And I think that's the biggest challenge right now is, can you simply survive and persevere and make it through this winter, which is going to be incredibly tough for a lot of places as they run out of PPP funds, as they as they have to pivot to this back to the delivery takeout only model. But I also do think that consumer behavior will have changed permanently long term. It's a bit like, hey, do you remember 10 years ago when you went to go order something, and you didn't just go to Amazon and order it and it showed up at your house in a day or two? Well, that's no longer how you as a consumer or I as a consumer behave, right? We go on Amazon, Walmart, wherever we need, we're going on the internet first as opposed to second. 10 years ago, hey, I wanted to go down to local Best Buy or Home Depot or whatever that was.
Right.
And I think the restaurant industry is going to experience the same thing a bit. And I hate to sort of be the bearer of bad news or truth or whatever that may be, but I feel like we're a bit like the taxi industry before Uber, where we got really complacent on the technology and convenience front, but convenience always wins for consumers. That is like, you can deliver a worse result, but if it's more convenient, in general, consumers will pick that. I mean, I think if you look at the brands who've done an exceptional job through the pandemic and grown, Domino's, Wingstop, Panera, they all invest heavily in this category. They already saw it as a long-term play. I mean, Domino's has been spending a couple $100 million a year for the last 5 years investing in technology. I mean, the virtual dinner bell, the pizza tracker, all these pieces of tech that, the sort of independent space looks at it and is like, oh, well, that's stupid. But their financial results don't show that it's stupid, right? And I think that from a consumer basis, there's still a lot that independent restaurants can do and should do. One of the first things is getting off the third-party apps, use them like a Groupon, build a native solution. We're working with a company called Figure Eight Logistics right now to help us with that tech stack, because there is so much. Oh, well, what do I do for this, or how do I do this? But you can actually uncouple the marketplace from the logistics fulfillment. Like, most people don't know, DoorDash actually has a DoorDash Drive that's a fixed price only for the delivery portion, not for the marketplace. So you're not going to pay the 15 to 30% piece to them. They're going to charge you a flat fee of between $5 to $8 for the fulfillment piece only, right? Well, hey, if I could go tell most restaurateurs, hey, I'm going to make you 15 to 30% more money, there'd be a stampede coming in like, oh, wow, I don't even make that much money today, right? As a percentage. And yet, if you go simply to a native solution there, that'll work. I think most people are sort of hoping that things will just go back to normal. But I think, and again, this has been a super long answer, but really at its core, I think consumers are going to still want to sit on their couch in their sweatpants after a hard day and have an exceptional meal. I do think fundamentally, though, consumers are not going to change wanting others to cook for them. The setting in which that happens will change and evolve, but they are still going to want others to cook for them.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're just tuning in, Alistair is not in the dark. He does have electricity. It's just that his camera is not working properly. But kind of shifting gears a little bit, talk a little bit about, I got too much text in here. Sorry about that. What your customers for Vine, what are they going to experience when they're working with you?
Yeah, I mean, so, we do a full sort of back end set of services for restaurants. Most restaurateurs didn't get into the business to do the business side of it. They didn't want to handle AP, AR, managing, hiring, and firing employees. That's not the part that gets most people out of bed in the morning that are in the restaurant industry. There's obviously some exceptions to that, but most got into it because they love providing warm hospitality. They love food and wine. They love, whatever those pieces are. They love, beer or spirits or any of those things that really sort of elicit the passion. And then all of a sudden they walk in and they're like, holy hell, like, that part, that's the fun part of the job, is only 10% of what I get to do on a daily basis. And I'm spending 80 to 90% of my time trying to figure out, like, do I have any cash left in the bank? Because I have all these outstanding invoices and so what we really do is we really come in and provide a full back office functionality for those clients. So, we handle that AP piece of, hey, let's get those invoices in. Let's get them, your bank rec's done. Let's do the accounting for you. And let's deliver it to you in a way that really helps you operate a better business. There's plenty of accountants out there, but there's very few sort of restaurant-focused accountants out there that are going to break up your, GL, general ledger, into buckets that make sense. Hey, are you looking at what your produce spend is, what your meat spend is, what your back bar spend is, like, what do your COGS look like, specifically broken up in those categories, so that we can start providing some levers and some meaningful comparative analysis for you of, hey, look, your food cost is 40%. Your food cost is 30%. Here's what's driving that food cost, right? Here's what's driving your labor cost. Here, you're paying way too many penalty hours because you're not enforcing that your employees need to take meal breaks, right? So we really, dive in there. We can do it just on the accounting side. Most of our clients, I'd say 90+%, also take our advisory service. So we've got a team of basically directors of ops, GMs, restaurant group owners, et cetera, that provide operational and financial advice and advisory on a monthly or quarterly basis. They also, send a weekly check-in email, but for the most time, they're walking through the P&L with the team, whatever that team looks like, and owners, GMs, chefs, sous chefs, however many people the decision maker decides to involve in that process, and they're going to walk through and say, hey, here's the areas of opportunity. Here's what I did when I encountered these when I was running an operation, and here's how you could potentially move that. And then sort of the last phase of our business is the HR consulting. We see, I think the average HR litigation suit in California right now is about $150,000 is the award that comes out from that. And yet almost no restaurants, unless you're a really, really big boy, have an HR department. And so it's this huge sort of risk piece. I sort of liken it akin to having a security system on your property. is, hey, are you putting some steps in place so that you can minimize the risk and exposure to a large HR claim lawsuit? And are you figuring out a way that you can really retain and get your employees to stay and thrive? I mean, we all know that turnover in the industry is a huge challenge, and I think most people aren't necessarily aware of exactly what the costs are associated with like churning over your entire staff every year, and the amount of retraining and the time and money spent on all those things. So we'll come in and we can do everything from a basic HR training. We can put together hiring guides, employee handbooks. A lot for a lot of our clients, we're the outsourced HR department. So we have their back if they're having an issue with an employee. They'll bring us in. We can sort of be on hands on or hands off as much as possible. Like, hey, here's all the stuff. Now you at least have all the stuff, an employee handbook and all of those basic pieces, all the way up to, hey, we can do it for you. Obviously, the cost is substantially different between the two.
Yep, understood. So, moving along here, for somebody that's starting a restaurant, what kind of advice would you give them?
I mean, and this will sort of harken back to my dad's thing, is you always got to start with the financials. And so I really strongly suggest, and this, everybody wants to start with the food and the location. And, I just actually was going through this with a potential client a few weeks ago, where he's sending me location spaces. He's like, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Here's my menu. And I'm like, look, I love the passion. I think that's one of the things that our industry does so well, so much better than other industries, is really having that passion. I mean, nobody gets in the industry to make a ton of money, right? Like there's a lot of easier ways to make a lot more money doing something else, but it's really about that passion piece. But it all has to make sense financially, right? If your lease and really the core of it all is, what's your lease? If your lease doesn't make any sense, you'll never make any sense as a business, because if you've got to do 5 turns a night at full occupancy every single night to have any of it make any sense to make you $3 at the end of the day, it's probably not a deal you should do. But you don't get any visibility on any of that if you don't build an initial model. And so, this is one of the things we do a fair amount of is, hey, throw $5,000 at us. Let us help you work with you to build an initial model, because to me, then it's like, it takes away that emotional aspect of, is this the right space or not? I don't know. Let's plug it into the model and see what happens, right? Let's see how many turns you'd have to do. What's your check average have to look like to have this make any sense and have you make some money? Because, despite the passion, everybody in it is in it to make some money. And also, that's the only way you're going to run a sustainable business. I mean, I think one of the things that we see coming out of the pandemic is the industry was overheated. There were too many restaurants on bad deals where financially they just never made sense, right? And all of those have sort of started to go away. But I think we're going to see a little bit more prudence about, okay, does this make sense? Can I serve? How many meal periods in a week can I serve? What does that look like? What's the check average at lunch and dinner? Like, what kind of cogs do I think I can run? And I think that's also where like delivery and takeout are going to come in, where it's like, hey, I might have a small space that I can only seat X number of people in, but I think I can do 20% of my business takeout, delivery, catering. Oh, well, that deal might make more sense then, and that might work better in the model. And again, a model's only as good. You can throw whatever numbers you want in it and make it tell you any story you want it to tell you. But if you actually really look at it and use it as a good barometer, and certainly for our own restaurants, I think that's part of why we've been around now, oldest place, 26 years, is looking at the fundamentals of the deal and the opening and all of the pieces on a financial basis. I realize that's way less sexy and way less exciting, but it allows us to weather a storm like we're currently experiencing. And I'm not trying to gloat about that, but it just, if you look at it through a financial lens, and I think the other person who really preaches this is Nick Konis from the Alinea Group and Talk. in Chicago, and they've put up some of their best results through the pandemic because they also sort of have approached and looked at things in a slightly different manner with his financial background than sort of the industry average. And I think having that as your underlying thing, if the numbers don't make sense, nothing else does. I know Telman Fertitta is also someone who espouses that heavily. I mean, if we look at these sort of true industry luminaries who are incredibly successful, most of them start fundamentally with a financial model and financial controls that make sense so that they can operate the business on a daily basis from that point. Again, it's not sexy. If you don't want to do it, we can help you do it. And that's really where we come in. A lot of our clients are like, look, I'm not a finance expert. I have zero desire to be a finance expert. I want to operate a great hospitality business. I'd love some help doing the pieces of the job that I hate doing. Can you take those on for me so that I can focus on what I love? And truthfully, also, if you're doing something you're bad at, you're probably not doing it very well. And it's oftentimes better to just pay someone else to do that really well for you than to try and stumble through it, because odds are you're going to do it poorly, you're going to hate doing it, and it's actually not going to provide more value to your business than if you just paid someone else to do it.
Amen from the marketing guy that says you should definitely do that. Very cool. So got a lot of good information from you. If you could change one thing, let's spell if right, in the industry, what would that be?
Ooh. I think the biggest piece that we're going to have to change is we're dinosaurs when it comes to technology. And we as an industry have deliberately rejected it and not embraced it. And some of that's also on the technology guy's side. I'm not saying it's exclusively us. I have this sort of statement where there's restaurant people and there's technology people, and never the two shall meet, because the technology people want to do all this stuff but don't understand the margins and no chef is going to pull out an iPad when a delivery comes in the middle of service to take inventory and add everything into a digital inventory and sign a digital receipt slip and then email that off to the accounting team for them to get it paid immediately. That's not a realistic idea. And yet the amount of companies that pitch us on, hey, well, this is what we're going to do, and all you have to do is enter everything in to the digital inventory, and now we can give you costing for everything, but you also do have to keep up to date all the quantities of oh, that's a case of avocados, but it's only 12, not 24, or it's 14, or it's 18, or they're large fancy, or they're small fancy, or they're all these other pieces, right? That's not a realistic thing. And by the time the chef, who again is generally not a technology person, enters all that info in, you probably lost money on the thing, even though you now get to track it, right? And I think figuring out how to sort of bridge that gap, and I think we're starting to see people poke at it. I'm seeing a lot more interesting things happening in that space. I think we're going to see a lot of innovation in that space come out of this crisis, because you're going to have a ton of people who were restaurant people who got laid off, had a great idea, and decided, you know what? What's the risk? I should run with it now, right? And I think, through every sort of recession or challenge, I mean, what came out of 07, 08? Uber, Airbnb, Dropbox, right? Most of the time, a recession leads to some great innovative ideas that can fundamentally change the world. I think this is the largest reset to restaurants in more than 100 years. Since World War II, World War I, we have not had a disruptive event that fundamentally changed or modified our business models in 100 years. That's crazy. The only other industries I can think of that are anywhere close to that are education, which also going through exactly the same thing right now, and potentially healthcare to a lesser degree, right? And every other industry's already been heavily impacted by tech or outsourcing or globalization or all of these other forces that have been raging for the last 50, 60 years. Ours hasn't been. This is now the time where ours is going to be. And so I think that's sort of the biggest piece is tech doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be bad. It can enable a lot of what a lot of our struggles in terms of monitoring what's going on, having a good idea on our cash position, having look, we have a lot of, the average AGM or GM these days is much less seasoned than they were 10 to 20 years ago. Like, how do we support them with technology to give them some guardrails so that they know when to send the line cook home because you're not putting up the revenue that day, to know when to send the bar back home because it's just not happening, or, hey, it looks like you're going to have a super busy evening because you've got a ton of resis and there's a football game down the street from you. Like, we know a lot of those things inherently, but we haven't sort of digitized or given tools for our teams to better operate the restaurants more predictably, more reliably, and thus obviously more profitably at the end of the day. And so I think that's really the biggest thing to me that I'm super passionate about looking at changing or impacting, is this sort of intersection of hospitality and technology, because I think a lot of people feel the technology is cold and lifeless, and so that's sort of antithesis to the hospitality business. But I think we're going to see that change. I think we're going to see, you already see huge adoption of delivery and takeout via technology. Obviously, we're going to have to get better than that. Facebook, Instagram marketing was, restaurants are just sort of getting into over the last 3 or 4 years. But hey, we have an opportunity to talk directly to both our current consumers and a much larger demographic of people who aren't currently our consumers right now, today, in a direct one-to-one fashion that doesn't require us putting an ad on TV or a print and magazine. We actually can have an ongoing dialogue, which to me is the same thing we do when someone comes into a restaurant.
Yep.
The manager walks over and says, "Hey, how was your meal? Is there anything we could have done better?" We have to learn how to take those same skills that we already do really well within the four walls of our restaurants, and figure out how to do them digitally. Hey, you got a delivery order from me. Send a follow-up email. Was it good? Did you like it? Would you order again? It's the same touch that you're already doing in person, but digitizing some of those other touches. And I think that's really where no one's figured it out yet, right? No one, all the way from the Michelin starred places all the way down. I mean, I think Domino's and some of the QSR places are starting to get it pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But anything from Chili's and Applebee's and that sort of style of dining all the way up to Michelin starred, no one's figured it out. Cheesecake hasn't figured it out. Landry's hasn't figured it out. Like, we're talking billion-dollar companies haven't figured it out. And so there's a great opportunity for, especially on the independent side, like, get creative. What's the risk? It's pretty bleak out there already. May as well try a few things, especially if they're cost effective, to see what you can do and see what you can shake free, because there's an opportunity there. The market is changing. The world is changing. The dynamic is going to change. We'll still have dine in, but if you could extend that hospitality online, you can really, there's a great opportunity there for someone else to have a big impact on that space.
Amen. You're speaking our language with online and automations. That's part of what we do. Obviously not on the level you're talking about, but we understand that if you can get connected and keep that communication going online, you can have a lot of success.
Well, think about it. Like, you've got regulars in store. How do you identify your regulars online? Shouldn't you treat them in a similar manner to the regulars coming in the store? And shouldn't, if they come in the store, you treat them like a normal regular, right? Like, how do you start thinking about that? How does that fit into your, to me, at the core, hospitality is hospitality, whether it's delivered online or delivered in person.
Mm-hmm.
It's a slightly different skill set, but as an industry, we're the hospitality industry. That's what we're supposed to deliver. We're supposed to make someone feel warm and exciting and cared about, and we can still deliver that. It's just we're going to require a little bit of a different thought than I think most people are. But I think most restaurateurs also aren't giving themselves credit that, hey, you figured out how to deliver it in the four walls, and oftentimes in a concept that maybe didn't exist before and in a location that didn't exist before. This is scary and crazy in all the same ways, and yet you've got a lot of the skill set that you already knew how to do that in person. You just have to, find a way to deliver it, digitally as well.
Amen once again. So What do you love most about what you do?
You know, so it sort of depends on which side of the coin I'm talking about. So I'll talk about both sides just because I think they're different. I'll start with the sort of the Vine solution side and our consulting side. Really the the we help people make their dreams come to life and stay to life, right? So it's one thing to stand the thing up, and we all know what the statistics are on failure rate 2 years in on the restaurant industry, 70% or whatever it is. That number I'm sure is going to go up this year, sadly. But it's it's one thing to get the thing stood up. It's another thing to have it operate and have a history and become really part of that community, not just the flash in the pan piece, right? To see the regulars, to have the regulars, we've got and this will sort of flip it to the other side is, with our oldest restaurant being 26 years old and I'm 34, I've been going there since I was 8 years old, right? And we have, I think we've got two staff members in our original location, one of whom's only down to part-time. Sorry, the other one just retired last year. The other one is part-time, who I've known for 26 years of my life, right? And that's incredibly awesome to see. Look, they're raising their families because of the business that we were able to create, are able to create and sustain. We've provided all of this impact, and then we also get to see all of the sort of family tree of all the people. Eric, who co-founded Tender Greens, that Danny Meyer invested in, and is now on a big expansion spree. He at one point was our sous chef, and you look at sort of the family tree, as I refer to it, of all the restaurants that have come out of sort of people who worked and had big formative phases of their career in our places. And that's super powerful and awesome to see. And we have a little bit the same side on Vine Solutions, where we've unfortunately spawned some competitors because people have worked for us and then gone and done their own thing, which is still really cool to see. A little less advantageous on the business side, but you take the good with the bad. But I think overall, it's really like that core on the Vine Solution side is we help people achieve their dreams, and we help them really do the portion of their dream that they love to do, and that makes them sort of come alive. And when you get we've received, and we look at our thing as not just a supplier relationship, but really as a partnership, right? Like, we are the back office partner for these clients, and so we cut our fees heavily when the pandemic hit, sort of in line with their sort of cut revenue, right? We saw a lot of our clients. Some of them still have not reopened, and some, unfortunately, will never reopen. But we saw a lot that went overnight, 50% revenue reduction, right? And we were like, look, we're going to cut our fees back as well in line with that. And to just see the outpouring of support and the emails that my team has really been able to generate by hand holding, and people are freaking out, and oh my god, there's the PPP thing, and now what happens with this, and there's just so much uncertainty. And dining regulations changed, or this was acceptable and now isn't. My team's done such an exceptional job that we've just gotten some fantastic feedback from clients like, hey, I couldn't have done this without you. And it's obviously a stressful time for all, but when you get that type of feedback, it's just it you're like, look, I know that 50 more people today have a job because we were able to help that owner get through this crisis. That feels just amazing. And then on our own restaurant side, it's very much the same. You watch sort of, my friends and I, who grew up going to our restaurants, and other people I knew growing up with, a lot of them now have kids and are taking their kids to the restaurant that they grew up with, and to see that sort of multi-generational piece. And then also for our staff to see, how many have, some of them have risen through the ranks, some of them have gone and done their own thing, to just know sort of that impact piece. I think that's really one of the powers of restaurants is the gates open, come on in, right? We accept every single, we don't care how badly you screwed up in the past. If you're willing to show up on time, work hard, put your head down, and contribute, we're going to have you, right? And I think that there's not a lot of industries left in the country that exist that way. And I think it's awesome to know that we've had that level of impact, and that we have regulars that have been coming for 25 years, right? Like, you've seen their kids grow up. It's just cool to see the power of the community that comes from a restaurant, and really as a social meeting point. And you know earlier you asked, hey, do you think there'll be a boom in dine-in? I think dine-in restaurants are one of the last few, especially as malls are starting to die off more rapidly. They're one of the last few major social connection points that we have in a world increasingly going digital.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you've seen all of the op-eds, you've seen all of the heartbreaking stories, you've seen, hey, all the post, hey, my last dinner at my favorite regular spot, all of this stuff happening. I think consumers are really starting to understand. I think overall, the industries are really understanding and seeing firsthand what an impact that actual community building is, and how much we as social human creatures desperately crave a place for that connection. And restaurants are going to continue to be one of the most prevalent places for that to happen, especially as other areas, movie theaters, malls, etc., sort of go the way of the dodo bird.
Right on. Yeah. Lots of great information today, Alistair. Wanted to make sure people know that they can find Vine Solutions online as well. Is there a website for all your restaurants that?
Unfortunately, no. We're actually, that's one of the projects we're working on now. While we have we thought we'd have a little bit more time because the world would be maybe stabilized at some point. And of course, the last 2 weeks we've had wildfires in California, and that obviously has a heavy impact on outdoor dining. We're currently in the process of building out the sort of parent company site.
Right.
Each individual restaurant has its own site. So there's leftbank.com, lbsteak.com, and mesamediterranean.com, as well as then Camper MP in Menlo Park.
Gotcha. Is that, if we were to go on Vine Solutions, is there any links to those, or are they completely separate?
They're completely separate, right? We want to make sure that a client doesn't feel like we're going to prioritize our own properties over others. We definitely leverage the fact we understand, hey, here's what's going on in the industry and here's what's going on in our own restaurants. We do test a lot of the stuff we do in our own restaurants first, and say, hey, does this work? Does this work for the team? Can we show that this helps profitability? And if so, then we'll bring it over back to the other side. So we sort of, as much as possible, we play the role of guinea pig for our clients on our own properties first.
Gotcha. Good stuff. Well, we'll make sure to get those websites and share them in the replay comment section and that sort of thing in description.
Awesome.
So as you can see down here on the bottom of the screen, you got Vine_Solutions if you want to check them out on Instagram.
Yep.
And of course, the website is vinesolutions.com. Please, if you're in the restaurant industry and need the help that Alistair and his team can provide, check that out for sure. And while you're online, just like he's been espousing, we need to be tech savvy. While you're out there doing that stuff, follow us, dine.digital. We talk to amazing individuals like Alistair from time to time, and we're not doing that. We're trying to get that tech stuff up and running for restaurants. So that's what we're doing out here.
I mean, they need that help, right? Just a little help, a little hand holding. I mean, as I say, they all have the skills. They all know what works. They just need some help digitizing them.
Definitely. So what's part ways with this last question about a pro cooking tip? I know you know a lot about the back end. What do you know about the actual cooking? Tell us something.
So, I cook at home a decent amount. I think the biggest thing for me that I would say is, a lot of people under season. And I think tasting and seasoning throughout is probably the biggest cooking tip. As you cook stuff, pours on, say, meat, open up as you're warming it up to make it pull in flavor. So the biggest thing I say is, look at flavor profiles. One of my favorite books is the Flavor Bible, which is all about different flavor profiles. So, hey, some acid with something else is going to deliver something really delicious. I don't cook as much from recipes. I use them sort of as hey, I want to learn how to cook this type of thing. Okay, what do those flavor profiles look like, and how does that sort of play? But I think if you can master 3 or 4 flavor profiles, you can kind of apply them to almost anything. Everybody will think you're an absolutely, great home cook. But in reality, it's really just, hey, are you checking all the boxes? Do you have some fat? Do you have some salt? Do you have some acid? I think I'm not the first person to certainly talk about this, but I think that seasoning regularly, seasoning thoroughly, salt you got to be a little careful with at the end, just because you don't want to make it too salty. It's harder to make it less salty, but also you don't want to make it not salty enough. It makes everything taste better.
Yes, that's it. Salt. Put more salt on, but not too much.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, Alistair, that kind of wraps up everything for today. We really appreciate your time sharing everything about what you guys are up to. Once again, please follow and check them out online and support them if you can, and do the same for us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for having me on. It was a pleasure. Very interesting questions. And I look forward to doing it again sometime soon.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next time on The Dish.